What's up, guys? Learning with Rich here. So, after learning how to create spaces and zones in our project to define the volumes, so this time around, we are going to talk about the building performance analysis. So, in Revit MEP, you use an analytical model for building performance analysis. So, the analytical model interprets the spaces and zones in the Revit model. So, to evaluate the energy loads requirement of the building, so you define the heating and cooling load information for a building model. So after you define the information, so we can use the tools in Revit MEP to perform the heating and cooling loads analysis, which is what we are going to do later on after we discuss the analytical model and some ways to define the spaces and zones properties. Okay, so in Revit MEP, properly defined spaces and zones provide an accurate model to analysis software for conducting a building performance analysis. So understanding the MEP analytical model and how analysis software interprets the model is the key to obtaining the accurate result. So what is this analytical model? An analytical model created in MEP for building performance analysis consists of spaces and their bounding elements. So the relationship between spaces and bounding elements determines how the analysis software interprets the analytical model. All right? So spaces are the base unit of analysis in an analytical model. So properly defined spaces in an MEP model, just like this is our MEP model. Properly defined spaces ensure the correct information and relationships are passed to the analysis software in Revit, and space volumes that needed to be analyzed as having loads beside the loads of adjacent spaces are modeled with an individual space. So for example, a space at the perimeter zone is modeled as the area affected by the solar load of a window opening. Now, let us try to open up our heating and cooling loads for us to be able to see the analytical model. Okay, so from the Analyze tab, let's go to the Reports and Schedules, and then you will see there heating and cooling loads, or you can type LO. So we are not going to calculate the heating and cooling loads, but we are just going to see how the analytical model looks like, which is this one. So that's why it is really important for you to be able to place the spaces and zones properly and accurate in your model. Because just like other software, garbage in is equal to garbage out. So that's why make sure you are specifying the zones correctly. Okay, so this is the analytical model. Now, if I'm going to select the details tab here, so I'm going to click that. So you will be able to explore and observe your building model if you have placed it correctly. Okay, so the process of viewing your analytical model is like this one. So you open the heating and cooling loads, and then after that you can view now your complete analytical model. So what you can do is you can select a particular space or zone to view if you are able to place the space correctly. So that's why if I go to the details here on the spaces, I can see that I have the building model here. So these numbers that you are seeing, these are actually the zones. Okay, and like what I have said on our earlier discussion about defining volumes, a zone is a collection of spaces. So if I'm going to expand, let's say number one, you can see that you'll be able to see all the spaces on that particular zone. Okay, so you can select a particular space or zone to view your analytical model. Okay, so let us try to do this. So let's say, for example, I'm going to expand, let's say number 5. Okay, so that's number 5. Or let's say I'm going to open number 8. Okay, and then on my number 8, since the space is quite big, so I just considered it as a one zone. Okay, so that's why I have one zone, and then on that one zone, I have one space here. So if I click that, I can see here the space type, the construction type, the number of people, electrical load, which is what we're going to discuss later on. Okay, so anyway, I'm gonna click this space here under the number 8 zone, and then I can select your highlight for me to be able to see where is that particular space. So if I click that, so I can see that that is my particular space there. Okay, so if you want, what you can do is you can toggle off the highlight, and then you can select, and then you can select the other tool here, which is isolate. So you can isolate that particular model. Okay, so that's how you view your model. So as you can see, it's not that difficult. Okay, so of course you need to use your view cube here for you to be able to see it nicely. Okay, now to discontinue the isolation, so you just need to click again the isolate, and then you will go back again to the view. Now, so let's say, for example, I'm going to expand the zone 10, which is our zone 10 here, and then expand that. Okay, so as you can see, I have here a couple of spaces. Now, if I want to highlight that zone, so I just click the zone here, and then I can click the highlight. There you go. Okay, and of course, you can still isolate that if you want. Okay, so I'm going to isolate that, and then I'm going to de-highlight it. Okay, so there you go. So if ever a space or portion of the space is not correctly bound, it should be visible when inspecting each zone. That's why it is very important for you to be able to learn how to view your analytical model. So from the details, so you can go here, and then you can use these tools so that you will be able to see if some portion of the space there is not correctly bounded. Okay, so it should be visible when you inspecting each zone. Okay, so let's say, for example, I'm going to expand 11. Okay, and then I'm going to isolate. I'm going to select that, and then automatically, since isolate here is turned on, so it will isolate now that particular zone. Okay, so the purpose for isolating either zones or spaces is to make it easier to verify that no space has been missed, especially when viewing a large model. Okay, so that's how you view it. Now, the next exercise that we will be doing, okay, so after learning how to view your analytical model, okay, so after learning that, so I'm just going to cancel. I'm going to open another exercise for that, which is defining the heating and cooling loads. I'm going to open that exercise. So after learning how to view the analytical model, so let us now learn how to define the heating and cooling loads of our spaces and zones. Okay, so to start with, okay, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to specify what type of building is you're working on. So we need to correctly define that. So by the way, don't be confused with these colors here. So I just place here a zone color. This is just a color fill legend, okay, based on HVAC zones. Okay, so that is not our exercise. So our exercise is we're going to specify the heating and cooling loads. So we're going to define the heating and cooling loads for a conference center building. All right, so right after we learn how to view the analytical model, so let us define the heating and cooling loads for a conference building center. Okay, so for example, you have received the building plan for a conference center building. So you now want to define the heating and cooling loads for the spaces and zones of the building. So how to start that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the Analyze tab. and then I'm going to select heating and cooling loads here. Okay, so I go back again to the heating and cooling loads. Right, so next is you need to specify what is the building type. Okay, so what is the building type? So let's say I want that to be an office, and then you need to select what is the location. So you can click that ellipsis button there, so you can click, and then you can use the internet mapping service, and then you can type here the value. So let's say, for example, I'm staying in Auckland, New Zealand. Okay, then let's search for it. There it goes. There's the Auckland Island, New Zealand. I'm going to select that. Right, so there's the Auckland, New Zealand. Okay. So anyway, so after you select the location, so you just need to select OK. So that is accurate. So it's based on the internet mapping service. Okay, so aside from that, so we are going to specify the heating and cooling loads parameters of the space. So how to do that? So let us save first the settings. So let us save it. Okay, later on we are going to come back to that window so that we can um, uh, specify more details about the building. Okay, so but before that, let us start specifying the space heating and cooling loads parameter. So we are not going to select all the spaces and then specify the heating and cooling loads parameters one by one, but because it will take a lot of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select one, and then I'm just going to show you how, and then obviously you will know the rest how to do it. Okay, because it's the same way. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this cafeteria here, since I want to specify a proper parameter for this space cafeteria. So I'm going to select that, the space. Make sure you are selecting the space. And then from the properties, so what you can do, you move the slider down, and then you can go to the energy analysis, and then you can specify here what is the space type. Okay, so that's number one. So what is this space for? So as you can see, it's a cafeteria. So I'm going to change the, instead of building, so I'm going to click the ellipsis button. Okay, and then after that, you can see here the list of default space type settings. Okay, so each space type settings here, if I'm going to click one, so let's say the cafeteria, I want this property to be dining area space type settings. So I'm going to select dining area, and then you will notice here that you already have a standard values for that. Of course, you can change that if you want. Okay, so you can change that if you want. Okay, but I'm not going to change that because this is already standard. So if you are a designer, if you have any other values for this energy analysis, so by all means you can change all of these settings. So what I'm just telling you guys that these space type settings already has a default values that you can use. So these are standard. Okay, so I'm going to select dining area for that because I want that for this cafeteria. Okay, so I'm just showing you that you need to specify the correct space type settings for each spaces that you will be creating in your project. Okay, so that's number one. So I'm just going to select here OK. There you go. So I now have the space type for that. Now, another thing that you might consider is the number of people that will be coming over from time to time, or the average number of people that will come into the cafeteria from time to time. So what I'm going to do is, again, from the energy analysis, there is a parameter here that is called people. Okay, so I'm going to select your edit. And then, as you can see here, it says here by space types, and then there's the default value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the drop down arrow, and instead I want to specify myself the number of the people. Okay, so I'm going to select specify, And then I can specify here number of people or area per person. So it's up to you. Again, you are the designer, you are the engineer, you should be able to know what is this. So let's say for the number of people, I just want to select this. I just want to put here 50. Okay, so let's say that's the number of people that will be coming here in the cafeteria, an average number. Okay, so 50. Now, aside from that, we also need to specify the sensible and latent heat gain per person. So that's why, again, instead of using the default value here, I'm going to select specified, because if you select specified, you can type in here your sensible heat and latent heat value. Okay, so by the way, what is this? Just a basic knowledge. What is this latent and sensible heat? So latent and sensible heat are types of energy released or absorbed in the atmosphere. So latent heat is related to changes in phase between liquids, gases, and solids, while the sensible heat is related to changes in temperature of a gas or object with no change in phase. Okay, so you can just Google that, so just in case you want to have more clear definition or understanding about the sensible heat or latent heat. But as a designer, you should know what is this. Okay? Now, so I'm going to change the value of this one. So if you are in metric, so the value should be in watts, but I'm using imperial, so my value is BTU per hour. So let's say for this one, for the sensible heat, I just want a standard value of 230, and then this one is 200. Okay, so 200, and then I'll just select here OK. So there you go. So I'm just showing you that you can specify that on the space properties. Okay, so next, one thing that you might consider, another thing that you can consider is you need to specify what is the heating and cooling loads parameters for the zones. Okay, so we are now going to move on the zones. But if you still want more to add uh, properties on the spaces, by all means, again, just go back to the energy analysis. You can just modify these things here. Okay, you can define here, you can define here, and then you can also define the electrical loads of this particular space. Okay, so you can select edit, and then if you have computation, you can just put it here. Okay, the electrical loads. Since you are the designer, again, you should be able to know what is this. Okay, but in my part, I'm just showing you that you can change the property of your spaces here on the space properties. Okay, so you can explore these space properties uh, window, and then after that, we can now move on to the zone heating and cooling loads parameters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to deselect now the spaces. So let's say, for example, I'm now going to specify the zone. So here we have an airlock. So I'm going to select the zone here, this one, the HVAC zone 3. So make sure you are selecting the zone. As you can see, I selected the zone here. So there's the zone, HVAC zone. So the name is 3. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change here the service type. Okay, so what is the service type of this zone? Again, go to the properties. This is the zone HVAC property. So there's the service type. So you can click that drop down arrow, and then you can select a variety of service types ready for you to use, prepared by Revit. Okay, which is really cool. So let's say I want that airlock to be split system. So I'm going to type split system with, let's say, mechanical ventilation. Okay, so I'm going to select mechanical ventilation for that. Okay, and then if you have more details added to this airlock, so you can go to the cooling information, you can specify that, you can go to heating information, and then you can also specify the outdoor air information. Okay, so that's it. So you just need to select the zone, and then you go to the properties here for you to be able to add more parameters or values to that particular zone. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do after specifying the zone heating and cooling loads parameter, I'm gonna open the level 2 plenum plan. Okay, so level 2 plenum zone plan. This one. Okay, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to select all of this, and then I'm going to select your filter. Okay, I only want to select there the spaces. So I'm going to check none, and then I'm going to select spaces. Okay, so I only want to select the space, and then after that, I'm going to hold the shift. I do not want to include the stairs to my selections. I'm going to hold the shift to deselect the spaces on the stairs. So hold the shift. I'm going to deselect that space from the selection. I'm going to hold the shift. I'm going to deselect that space from the selection. Why? Because this is just a plenum plan, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to specify the correct condition type for this floor here. So I'm going to move the slider down, and then I'm going to specify the condition type here. So I'm showing that you can specify the condition type of a certain space here. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to select this unconditioned. Okay, unconditioned because this is just a plenum. Okay, you don't want to condition the plenum space. So that's the reason why I select all of this space that we have on our plenum plan and deselect the stairs because the stairs should be conditioned. But this plenum plan should be under the unconditioned type, right? So we're not going to condition that. So that's another option to properly specify the correct parameters on your analytical model. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to specify parameters in heating and cooling loads dialog box. So let us go back again to the heating and cooling loads. And then I'm going to open the details. Open the details. And then let me go to the zone 36. I'm going to expand this. Okay, so there's my 36. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click 36 zone, and then I'm going to select all the spaces in this zone. Right, so after that you can now specify, or let's say you want to see where is this particular spaces, so you can just isolate that. Okay, so that's the stair. Okay, so I want to specify the correct space type for that. So I'm going to select the ellipsis button, and then I'm going to look for, get it right, so stairway. So I want to properly specify what is that space type, stairway. Okay, and then I'm going to select OK. There you go. Okay, so by selecting all the spaces in the zone, so you can quickly assign all the selected spaces to our stairway space type. So space types have pre-assigned settings, just like what I have said to you earlier. So these are the pre-assigned settings that are used for calculating heating and cooling loads. Okay, and then again, don't forget to save the settings. Okay, so on your part as a designer, so make sure you specify the space and zone heating and cooling loads parameters on all the spaces and zones in your project. Okay, right? The only thing, the only reason that I just specified one rooms and one spaces and one zone in this exercise, because it will really take a lot of time if I'm going to specify each spaces and zones in this project. Okay, but at least you already get the idea. Now let us move on to the last part of the building performance analysis, which is calculating the heating and cooling loads. So I'm going to open the exercise for that, for the calculating heating and cooling loads. There you go. So in this lesson, we're going to learn how to calculate heating and cooling loads, because calculation of heating and cooling loads on a building model is an important step in determining the size of cooling and heating equipment. So properly sized cooling and heating equipment saves the initial and operational costs of the equipment. So in addition, it provides increased comfort to occupants by maintaining the required temperature in the building. So that's why calculating heating cooling loads is very important to our design. Okay, so let's do this. So after learning how to view the analytical model, how to specify the space and zones, heating and cooling loads parameters. Okay, so let us now go to the heating and cooling loads. Okay, and then let us do the calculation. So before we click calculate, so let us just change some property. Again, this is an office. Okay, so let's say I want to change that location. I want Auckland, New Zealand. For that, search. There you go. And then there's my location. Okay, so it's Auckland, New Zealand. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I want to specify what is the building service. Okay, so I want this to be, instead of active chilled beam, so I want this to be water loop heat pump. Okay, so you select the building service to specify the type of equipment that will be used to heat and cool the building. Okay, so aside from that, you can also specify here the schematic types of the building. So you can click the ellipsis button here, okay, to control the solar radiation entering the building. So I'm going to check the exterior windows here. So I want that to be this value. Okay, so using this exterior windows option, so you can perform multiple calculations with different building construction types to determine how these building types affect the heating and cooling loads. Okay, so this is my favorite, so I'll just check that one. So that's the value. Okay, and then I'll just select the OK here. If you are using a lower version of Revit, so instead of schematic type, this is building construction. So you look for building construction here. Okay, so they changed that to schematic types. All right, so let us just select here. Okay. Now, another thing that you might consider here, or another parameter that you might consider, is the building infiltration class. Okay, so instead of none, so I'm going to select here. Oops, sorry, building infiltration class. So you click the drop down arrow. So I'm going to select here medium. So what is this building infiltration class for? So we use this to specify an estimate of outdoor air that enters the building through leaks in the building and below. So I just selected here medium. Okay, so aside from that, you can specify what is the report type. Okay, to define the level of detail reported based on the heating and cooling loads calculation. And then you can also specify here what else? Project pace. Okay, the project pace to ensure that the Revit analyzes the correct model if pacing is used. Okay, so you can select from here new construction, existing, or other project paces. Okay, and then I'm not gonna change the ground plane here. Okay, I'm not gonna use this. I don't need this to define this parameter unless you plan to export the information about the level to be used for the ground plane also to the GB XML file. Okay, so what else? Sliver space tolerance. So for the sliver space tolerance, I'm gonna change this to 1 foot 6 inches. Okay, so by defining the sliver space tolerance, any bound space that is 1 foot 6 inches or 450 mm or smaller will automatically be included in the volume calculation. All right? Okay. Now, and another thing that you might consider is you can review the details here of your spaces and zones after you specify the general. So let's say, for example, I'm going to expand one here, this the zone one, and then I'm going to look for mech. So I select the mech here. This space mech again, you can just highlight it. So that's the one. You can isolate it. So that's the one. So make sure the space type is correct. So like that is electrical mechanical space type. So I'm just saying that after you specify the general, you can still go to your details here. And then after that, you can modify that zone type or space type here. Okay? All right, so now I'm going to select calculate to begin the heating and cooling loads calculation. So this process will take several minutes depending on your computer or just a few seconds. Okay, so after the calculation, the reports will be displayed on your project browser under the reports. So let us just wait for that, and then let us investigate. There you go. I think it's already finished. So there's now your report. Beautiful. So that's the report of your project. So here you can see the project, the address, calculation time, report time, latitude, longitude, all the necessary calculation parameters or properties that you needed for your building. Okay, so there's your building summary. So that's the office, that's the area, so that's the volume. Here you can see all the calculation here, the airflow, the maximum cooling capacity. All right, so you can go from here. You can check it also by spaces and zones. So aside from the summary, as you can see, there's the spaces and then there's the zone. So let's say, for example, I want to look for mm, zone. So what zone am I looking for? So let's say space summary for 19, 20, let's say 22. This one. So office for the 22 spaces. So that's the 214 rooms. As you can see, there's the area, there's the volume, peak cooling load, cooling airflow, okay, which is 3,326, the peak heating load, and heating airflow. So you can also click that for you to be able to see the more details about that particular room, the room 214. So as you can see, these are the calculation based on the parameters that you specified. As you can see, number of people, 5, sensible heat gain, 250, latent heat gain, 200, etc., etc. Infiltration airflow, 33 CFM. Okay? So it's really nice to have this kind of report, and it's really useful for the designer. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to open the project browser and then open up the level 2 HVAC zone plan. So I'm going to open this and then let's see that one. So this is that particular room that I'm talking about a while ago. So this space here, okay, space 214. Okay, so this is the one. So if I select this, oh, that's a room. This one. So that's the space. So if I click that one, I check the properties. As you can see here, this is the calculated supply, right? So the actual supply airflow is 0 here, okay, because there are no mechanical systems created yet in this particular room. That's why it's 0. But as you can see, there's already the calculated supply airflow. You already have an idea what's will gonna be your basis. Okay, so the calculated supply airflow. Okay, so another thing that you can do is after you create the heating and cooling loads, or after you calculate it, you can check it from here, from the project browser. You can see the reports. There you go. So there's that report. So you can just rename that if you want. Okay, so you can rename that if you want. And aside from that, what you can do is you can put here a color based on the calculated supply airflow. So how to do that? So from the Analyze tab, I'm going to select Color Fill Legend. So I click that one, and then I'm going to place it here just beside, and then make sure the space type here is HVAC zones. So I want the color scheme will be based on the HVAC zone. And okay, so by default, I can only select here cooling load by zones. That's okay. I can change that later on. So select okay. There you go. So let's click this because it's too long. Oops. How about three column? There you go. There you go. Now, I don't want this to be based on by zone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this. By the way, I'm going to select this, go to the properties, go to the type properties. I want to show the title. Okay. So I want to show the title and then okay. So I want to see the title there, right? And then I'm going to select again. There's the edit scheme. So I want to change that color. So instead of cooling load by zone, I want to change that based on calculated supply airflow. So calculated supply airflow, okay. So I'll change this to calculated supply airflow. Okay, apply and then okay. There you go. So it's now based on the airflow. It's beautiful, right? So this is really necessary on your design. So you can click that and then you can just move this like this, move it like this, just to tidy up your legend. There you go. There you go. So if you want to have this exercise file, so you can just comment on the comment section below. You can just put your email address and then I'll be sending you the exercise file. So hopefully you learned something from this video. We have learned how to do the building analysis of our model. Okay, building performance analysis, wherein we have learned how to specify the analytical model, how to view it, how to isolate, how to highlight it, and then we have learned how to define the heating and cooling loads parameters for the spaces and zones, and then finally we have learned how to calculate or how to use Revit to calculate the heating and cooling loads uh, analysis. All right, so thank you for watching, guys. Have a nice day.